A man is polishing an espresso cup in an empty café in Edinburgh. The cup's surface catches the pendant lights and warps his reflection into something older, something more haunted than the face he shows the world. He tilts it, watches the light bend, watches the shadows form where none should exist. He has been doing this for 8 months, showing up, making coffee, wiping surfaces, being the last to leave. He is, by every visible measure, a dedicated barista with a talent for punctuality and an unusual willingness to stay late. He is also a Guardian of Clivilius, and the family that owns this cafe has no idea why he's really here. Tonight, alone in the storeroom after the owner has gone home, he finds a ventilation grate that's been moved, and everything changes. Welcome to the Clivilius Storiverse podcast. I'm Nathan, and this is where I pull back the curtain on individual moments within the Storiverse, the people, the decisions, the collisions between ordinary lives and extraordinary circumstances. Each episode, I take one moment and I unpack what's really going on beneath the surface, the psychology, the relationships, the things people do when the rules they've lived by suddenly stop applying. Today, an empty cafe, a displaced grate, and a man deciding whether to protect the people he was sent to watch. The man behind the counter. Nathan Cowdery was born in Adelaide on the 28th of June, 1984. He drifted through jobs that never quite fit before settling in Hobart as a government business analyst, the kind of quiet, unremarkable career that leaves no trace in anyone's memory. Then in January 2018, a friend named Seth Holder handed him a portal key, and nothing was unremarkable again. He became a guardian, the founding guardian of St. Phyllis, in fact, and eventually the only person known to have mastered the Clive-mind interface, the system for accessing Clive's preserved consciousness. That's a distinction that carries weight in circles most people will never know exist. But that was before London, before the penthouse, before Amber, before everything that mattered fell apart in an afternoon of smoke and blood and a single word screamed from a dying woman's mouth. We'll get to London. But first, you need to understand who Nathan Cowdery is in this moment. March 2025, Edinburgh, because the man polishing espresso cups in the Leaf and Bean is not the same person who activated a portal key 7 years ago. He is what remains after the idealism has been burned out of him. A shadow, an observer, someone who no longer believes in safety, only in preparation. The Leaf and Bean. The Leaf and Bean Café sits on a quiet stretch of Morningside Road, south of Edinburgh's Old Town, where Victorian terraces yield to the slopes of the Braid Hills. It is, on the surface, exactly what it appears to be, an independent cafe with good coffee, warm light, and the kind of customer loyalty that doesn't need a rewards card to sustain it. But Nathan Cowdery didn't take a job here because of the coffee. The Campbell family name had surfaced in conversations where it shouldn't have, hybrid plants with impossible properties, blends that inspired unusual clarity of thought, a family that had avoided both official scrutiny and underground attention for generations, maintaining their secrets with a discipline that spoke of deep, inherited understanding. Daniel Campbell, the owner, is 48. A widower, his wife Eloise died in 2016, and he returned to the family estate with 3 grieving daughters and a legacy he only partially comprehends. He runs the cafe with the bearing of a man who knows exactly how far he'd go to protect what he's built. Nathan recognised that bearing the first time he walked past. It's the posture of someone standing guard over something they can't fully explain. 8 months Nathan has been here. 8 months of pulling shots, cleaning machines, memorising routines, cataloguing the quiet conversations that stop when he approaches, the deliveries that arrive at odd hours, the careful management of who accesses what. 8 months of being the last to leave, and Daniel has never once asked why. The penthouse. The memory arrives uninvited, the way it always does. Nathan is dismantling the espresso machine for its nightly clean, his hands moving on autopilot, and suddenly he's not in Edinburgh anymore. He's in London, 2019, a penthouse high above the city. It had been their sanctuary, white walls lined with maps and data, windows catching the sun in those final weeks. His brother Josh by the window, voice lit with conviction, outlining how they'd used the Clivilius Corporation's own infrastructure to expose what the world wasn't ready to know. Saul buried in financial models, Verity pinning intelligence to the corkboard, each thread part of a web she was determined to complete. And Amber, her face comes to him instantly, the freckles across her nose, the no-nonsense set of her mouth when she was focused. She wasn't in the room, not at first. She was running final checks, thorough, always thorough. None of them heard the knock for what it was. None of them moved fast enough. The sound of her body hitting the floor still haunts him. An ugly final thud. She stumbled through the door with blood already spreading across her chest. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, with urgency. Her last word was a command. Run. What followed was chaos, smoke, the metallic tang of blood, Saul's voice cracking as he tried to keep her alive, Josh yelling directions, Verity frozen for 1 second too long before gripping her portal key and vanishing into rainbow light with tears already on her face. Nathan waited until the last possible second, kneeling beside Amber as her eyes went glassy, her breath hitching once and then never again. He activated his portal key with a hand stained crimson and arrived in Clivilius with his knees buckled and the scent of burning still trapped in his hair. They scattered after that, as protocol demanded. Josh buried his grief beneath iron strategy. Verity became a ghost in the information grid. Saul found refuge in economic systems, as though balance sheets could compensate for bloodshed, and Nathan became a shadow. The displaced grate. Alone in the café after Daniel leaves for the night, Nathan finishes his cleaning routine, every action precise, deliberate, the muscle memory of a man who has turned repetition into surveillance. But something has been nagging at him since the afternoon. A wrongness his instincts flagged, but his conscious mind set aside. He crosses the room in silence. 8 months of working here have taught him which floorboards creak and which don't. The storeroom is small, utilitarian, shelves of supplies, bags of beans, stacked cups, rows of syrup bottles, everything in order, everything where it should be, almost everything. A faint draft brushes his face where no current should exist. Near the far wall, behind a stack of coffee filters, a ventilation grate sits slightly askew. The screws appear undisturbed, but the angle is wrong. It's been moved recently, then replaced with almost perfect precision. Almost, but not quite perfect enough. Nathan crouches without touching the metal, his fingers hovering above the surface, his mind racing. Someone accessed this space. Perhaps during the morning rush when attention was divided, when Daniel was distracted by the visitors who had been asking pointed questions about sourcing and suppliers. Visitors whose technique reminded Nathan of Guardian methodology, but with something off. Too precise, too obvious for properly trained operatives. Unless that was the point. The thought surfaces cold and clear. What if they wanted to be noticed? What if obvious surveillance was masking something more subtle? What if attention had been deliberately directed to create blind spots elsewhere? Choosing silence. Nathan stands in the storeroom with a decision forming that will define everything that follows. His phone is heavy in his pocket. Seth Holder, the man who first recognized his potential, who brought him into the Guardians, who gave him the portal key that changed his life, would want to know about this. The displaced grate, the suspicious visitors, the growing sense that the Campbell legacy connects to forces larger than anyone has realized. But something holds him back. It's not caution. Nathan is cautious by training, by trauma, by the memory of what happens when careful plans meet violent reality. But this is something else, something closer to recognition. It's the way Daniel manages his family's secrets with quiet dignity, the way he shoulders responsibilities that clearly weigh on him, the warmth of the cafe itself, not just a business but a haven, a space where something precious is being preserved. Nathan has seen too many lives shattered by hasty exposure to forces they weren't prepared to face, too many secrets torn open before their keepers could understand the consequences. He thinks of Amber, of the penthouse, of the way everything had seemed possible right up until the moment it wasn't. He grabs his coat and steps into the Edinburgh evening, locks the cafe door with deliberate care. The street is quiet, street lamps casting pools of light on damp pavement. Stars struggle against Edinburgh's light pollution overhead. distant points of brightness fighting against the encroaching glow. And walking home through the gathering dark, Nathan acknowledges the truth he's been avoiding for months. He is no longer investigating the Campbells, he is protecting them. The space between. What makes this moment so striking is the pivot it represents. Nathan Cowdery arrived at the Leaf and Bean as an operative. Clinical, observational, mapping patterns, cataloguing behaviours, building a case. The Campbells were subjects. Their secrets were intelligence. The café was a posting. And somewhere in 8 months of wiping counters and pulling shots and being the last to leave, the clinical detachment eroded. Not because Daniel said anything revelatory, not because the secrets revealed themselves, but because Nathan recognized something in the way Daniel stood behind his counter, the bearing of a man who would go as far as necessary to protect what he'd built, and saw himself. Both of them are guards. Both of them are keeping watch over something they can't fully explain. Both of them carry losses that have shaped the architecture of their daily lives. Daniel's dead wife, Nathan's dead colleague, and both of them are standing in an Edinburgh cafe that may be far more significant than either of them fully understands, surrounded by forces that are closing in from directions they can't yet see. Nathan's decision not to call Seth isn't weakness. It isn't sentimentality. It's the recognition that some things, some people, some places, some fragile ecosystems of trust and routine and carefully tended secrets deserve protection before they deserve exposure. That the right response to discovering someone has tampered with a ventilation grate is not always to sound the alarm. Sometimes it's to stand in the gap yourself and make sure nobody gets through. He doesn't know yet what the Campbell legacy truly is. He doesn't know how their hybrid plants connect to Clivilius, or why their café blends produce effects that remind him of substances found in another dimension. He doesn't know who moved the grate, or what they were looking for, or whether the visitors who arrived that morning are the same force that took Amber's life 6 years ago. But he knows this. The Leaf and Bean is still standing. Daniel Campbell is still tending his family's inheritance. And Nathan Cowdery, who once believed in causes and teams and penthouse sanctuaries, now believes in something smaller and harder to destroy. A café, a counter, the quiet discipline of showing up every day and being the last to leave. Some instinct, deeper than training and more personal than duty, tells him that the Campbell legacy and his own history are now irrevocably entwined. Dark reflections of each other, separate yet connected, like the worlds he moves between. And finally. Next time on the Clivilius Storiverse podcast, we step into a different life, a different moment, a different corner of this world. That's how this works. Every episode is a window into a single moment, and the ripples it sends through the lives around it. I'm Nathan. Thanks for listening. And if you've ever stayed late somewhere, not because you had to, but because leaving felt like abandoning something you hadn't finished understanding, you already know what it costs.